So, today I want to talk about something that has been incredibly helpful for me recently and just a way to reframe the way we relate to other people. And it's going to feel like some counterintuitive advice, but it's especially geared towards people who consider themselves to be people pleasers or really anyone who is an empath. And that is around this affirmation that I've been telling myself for the past few months, really, that is, I give other people the opportunity to work through their own issues when I am honest. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that and how it can be helpful throughout this video. But first, if you haven't yet, I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter where I send out videos and poetry and really just inspirational, motivational tips and sometimes confidence boosting exercises and things like that. And of course, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I've also recently published my poetry book, but there's more than just poetry, so I encourage you to check it out. And I do have an online course called Show Up Sure: Secrets to Embody Confidence for a Lifetime. Most of the feedback I've received from the course is that it has significantly helped people reduce their social anxiety. So today we're going to talk about something that will hopefully improve your social skills and your relationships. So if you want to go deeper or find that you have difficulty with social anxiety in general, I highly encourage you to check out the course. All of the links for all of those things are in the description below. So now, the affirmation, again, that I've been telling myself is I give people the opportunity to work through their own issues when I'm honest. What do I mean by that? We often, as empathetic people, as sensitive people, as people pleasers, feel like we need to take care of other people. And it's usually coming from a good place. But sometimes, as I'm sure you've heard before, that can result in us enabling the other person. Or what's something that I've been reflecting on lately is it actually blocks that person from being able to learn their own lesson. So for example, if parents of an adult child constantly give their child money or bail them out, they're enabling them to not have to learn. They're enabling certain behaviors, and that's preventing the child, the adult child in this case, to learn the lessons and learn the necessary skills to fend for themselves. And I understand this is very difficult for parents to do, even for their young children, when they think, I want to help them, I want to provide for them. But you can't teach a child to walk, or the child will not learn to walk if you're constantly catching them every time they fall. The child has to fall. And so what I've been reflecting on and thinking about is when we are honest with people, we share how we actually feel. It may sting the other person. And there are ways to do this delicately. I'm not saying to go be mean to people or to be harsh, but just suggesting that sometimes we stop ourselves from telling someone how we feel because we're afraid of hurting their feelings, when they may need to know how we're feeling, and them learning how we feel about the situation or how they might be coming across to us then gives them the opportunity to transform that in themselves. So for example, if you have a friend who bulldozes you and you have a hard time setting boundaries with them, and I think we need to be careful with boundaries because I'm a huge proponent of connection and softness and being loving and empathetic towards one another. Sometimes boundaries create too much separation, I think, or they risk going into that territory. But if we do need to set a boundary, say, for example, someone has been taking advantage of you and they know that, oh, she's just nice, she'll do it, or, oh, he'll pay for everything, I'm not worried about it, then it can be helpful to set the boundary. For example, saying, hey, I'm happy to help out, but do you mind giving me a little money for gas? Because this is really far out of my way. And you may not want to do that because you feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be a burden. But then if you don't, that other person will constantly take advantage of you or not realize how much you're putting yourself out for them. And this really depends on the energy that they bring and that you bring to the situation. If they're super incredibly appreciative and they acknowledge, oh my gosh, I know that you spent a lot of money for this. I know you went out of your way to do this. Then it's different. But if, for example, there's someone in your life that constantly is asking you to do things and not expressing their appreciation, not acknowledging how much you're doing for them, we kind of want that validation as humans, and then it might be worth your while to express how you're feeling so that they understand how they are coming across. And then the second part of that affirmation is they get the opportunity to work through their own issues. Think about any block that you've had in your life or any social dynamic that you've had to work on in yourself. You probably didn't work on it until somebody pointed it out to you. And it may have been painful to hear the first time, but a lot of times we're very grateful that someone eventually pointed it out to us. As a really silly example, I remember when I was in college, I guess was walking to class, and this acquaintance, this guy that I knew, he was part of like an organization that I was in, but we weren't close friends. But he saw me one day and he said, oh yeah, I saw you walking to class the other day and I wanted to say hi, but you look like a woman on a mission. You were so serious. And I was like, what? I didn't know that I wasn't approachable. I didn't know that I was going through life with this very serious demeanor. And he said when it was, and I remember thinking, like, was I stressed? Was I on my way to an exam? But I wasn't. And in my head, I was calm and relaxed. So that was very precious feedback. And since then, I've made a point of being more warm and more approachable and smiling more because I didn't want to come across that way. And that was a decision I made of my own volition. He didn't say, you need to be more approachable. He just said, here's what happened. And I understood how he interpreted my body language, and I didn't like that. So I changed it about myself. But I never would have known if he weren't honest with me. And so the more we practice being honest in ways that are sensitive and compassionate towards the other person, the more they can learn about themselves. And think about something in your own life that you're like, oh, that stung to hear, but I'm glad I did. Because a lot of times I'm thinking of a few people in my life who have a really hard time making friends, but I don't know them well enough to tell them why. And sometimes it's not our place. But if someone is doing something to me repeatedly, for example, here's a good example. I had a friend when I was living in New York, and she always canceled plans, or she would literally stand me up. Like, she would say yes, and I would go to the place. Like, let's say she said, yeah, I'm good for dinner at 7. And I would go to the restaurant, and then she wouldn't come. And I'd be like, where are you? And she said, oh, I'm sorry, something came up, da da da. And I had a big talk with her because this kept happening. Or she didn't always wait till then, but I would check in with her on the day of, and then she'd say, oh no, I have to cancel. And I was like, why do you do that? Like, why don't you just tell me before? And she had this huge fear around disappointing people. And so instead of disappointing me by telling me, hey, I can't make it to dinner on Friday, she just wouldn't tell me, which was way worse. As you can imagine, it's way worse to just not tell somebody and then have them show up and be like stood up. And so when I had this big conversation with her, she was like, thank you. She said, thank you so much, Trisha, because I have always had problems keeping friends and I never knew what I was doing wrong. To me, it seemed like very obvious, but we don't know what people's experiences are. We don't know what's going through their head. I had no idea that she had no idea that what she was doing was rude and not socially normal. But she didn't know that. And so by me being honest with her and saying, hey, when you stand me up, here's how I feel. And I tried my best to not attack her. I just said, like, here's what I'm experiencing. Here's why I've stopped making plans with you. Then she was able to work on that in herself. And this was years ago. I have no idea if she's improved that about herself or not, but she at least acknowledged, like, wow, thank you for telling me. No one's ever told me that before. They've just stopped being my friend. And especially now when ghosting is so common, we may not hear from people and not understand why. And it takes a brave soul to really tell us why and what we're doing that's off putting to people. And so, this is just a little reminder that when we are honest with other people, and I do want to say, I'm not suggesting go out of your way to tell someone what all their flaws are, but if it comes up within the relationship you have with a person, when you are honest with how you're feeling. The other thing about it is if someone, for example, is constantly asking you to do something for them or is behaving in a way that is not feeling good for you, you may build up resentment towards them. And they're not going to know. And we may think they should know, but they might not. So I'm thinking about a friend and referencing the example I used earlier. Think about if you have a friend that is constantly taking advantage of you, or you feel like they're always asking you for things but not really being appreciative of it. Every time I would say yes to that friend, I'd feel resentful. Like, ugh, I don't really want to do this, but I'm doing it because I don't know how to say no and I want to be nice. I don't want to hurt their feelings. That's not healthy. But once we get to the point where we can say, no, I can't do that. I would love to help you, but here's why this isn't working for me. Or I would be happy to help you if these conditions are met, or whatever the case may be. That, again, it gives the person the opportunity to work through their own issues, because then they can either change their behavior or do a lot of introspection as to, why do I keep asking for that? Why do I need control in this situation? A lot of people who are constantly bulldozing other people or taking advantage of other people do it from the need to have control over everything. And they're never going to learn to loosen their grip until someone offers some resistance and forces them to really reflect. So, all of this is to say, experiment with that mantra for yourself. Because I used it with a client the other day, and she was like, whoa, this is amazing, because she had never had it pointed out to her that way. And I think many of us have not had it pointed out that way, where we think that we're setting boundaries for ourselves and we're speaking our truth for ourselves. And yes, we are. And we're in relationship to another person. So it's important to consider how it's affecting them. So when we shift the perspective to, when I'm honest, not only does it help me, but it also gives the other person the opportunity to deal with their own issues, then it can soften the blow of their reaction. Because a lot of times we're not honest because we're afraid of how the other person will react. We don't want to break up with the person because we don't want to see them cry. We don't want to say no to the person because we don't want them to get upset. But that's ultimately their responsibility to handle how they feel. And ultimately, we cannot cause anyone to feel a certain way. Our actions would just shine a light on something that that person has within them that they need to work on. Again, I am not suggesting we go out of our way to be mean to people or to just nitpick and point out things that people should work on. It is also not our job to teach someone a lesson. But it is our responsibility to give people the opportunities to learn their own lessons that we cannot learn for them. Sometimes we think that, oh, I don't want to upset her, so I'm not going to do this thing. But maybe she needs to get upset. And it's not your responsibility to prevent her from getting upset. It's her responsibility to navigate her own emotions. And again, don't intentionally go make someone upset. But just something to try on and experiment with if you do consider yourself a people pleaser, or you find yourself resenting people, or you find it hard to speak up for yourself and share what you really want to share. I give people the opportunity to work through their own issues when I am honest. Let me know how that landed for you. Let me know how that felt. And please share in the comments what you think about this and other examples. I just kind of improvised this whole thing, so I didn't have any concrete examples in my mind. So I hope that was helpful. I would love to know what you think. And thank you, of course. Thank you for watching.